Okay, welcome to the final go-to session of the month. This is the go-to session for week 4. So, congratulations. We've pretty much reached the end of the month. Hopefully, this session will be a little bit shorter than the other sessions we've had because I don't have as much to go over. I just want to kind of cover what you need to do for the final project. Um, there's more to it than just submitting your public service announcement, so I want to make sure that people know about this. By now, you all received feedback from me. I do apologize, by the way. I'm not trying to make excuses. With 70 papers, it took me well into the weekend to finish, but everybody got feedback, I think, before the weekend was out, which gives you a full week to still work on your public service announcement. As you've noticed, I tend to write quite a bit to people, so it does take a while to create that feedback. But still, the goal was I had hoped to be finished by Friday, and instead I spent Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, grading people's essays. So I do apologize for the lateness, but I think you've all gotten feedback, and you should all have a pretty clear direction um, where to go. Okay? I even gave most of you sort of suggestions for your public service announcement. So even if someone's topic still wasn't perfect, it makes no sense to tell that person to start over or to find a new topic or tweak the topic. I pretty much would give people advice on what to do with your topic. It's still possible to create a really knockout PSA, even if the topic isn't perfect. I mean, there are people who can surprise me with what they do on the public service announcement. Okay, so let's kind of go over what we're going to cover in this session. Well, I don't have my overview slide. Okay, let's just get into it. It's pretty much we're going to go over the requirements and some reminders for the final project. First of all, because we just finished peer review, I do want to talk a little bit about editing versus revising, and this actually connects kind of with what I was covering in last week's session. Like, if I say editing, what does that mean to you? Or what is the difference between editing versus revising? Why am I putting it on the screen here as sort of two different options? They're related, but they're different, right? So, like, what does editing mean to people when you hear that term? You can use the chat box. You can just answer in a word or two if you don't want to type out a long response. But what does that bring to mind? And as I wait, I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. Okay, so Dustin says editing is more grammatical, and revising has to do with changing, adjusting content and structure. Wow, that's pretty awesome. I was waiting for people to sort of give a variety of things, and then I would put them together to give a perfect response. But Dustin pretty much nails it, right? Editing is like the smaller stuff. Editors, that's what they kind of do. I mean, big time like publishers hire editors who do a little bit more than just cleaning things up. But in general, that's what editors do, right? I mean, they fix commas, they fix small errors, they improve wording. It's kind of the smaller stuff, what we talked about last week, lower order concerns. And revising, and this is why I have this big eye here, which kind of looks like the eye of Sauron or something from Lord of the Rings. If you look at the word revise, it's got that word vision in it. So editing has to do with just sort of fixing stuff. Revising means looking at things entirely anew, right? Revisioning, revising. And that's what you need to do for this final project. Because, as I said last week also, we're done with the essay. So if you're... A lot of you, by the way, did awesome on the essay. I enjoyed reading them. But even if you weren't as happy with your finished essays you could have been, we're done with that, right? We move on. Now your task is to create an actual public service announcement in the form of a song, a video, a podcast, what have you. Okay? And that requires revisioning the material because you won't be able to just hand it in the same way again. I think I joked last time that an audio podcast is not you just turning on the microphone on your computer and reading your essay out loud. Nor is a film just a rehashing of your essay, right? You have to sort of choose the best moments, the most salient features of your essay, and you also have to figure out how to present that. So that's revisioning. So here's a kind of nifty picture of a house. It's under construction. That's sort of what you're doing here, okay? You're building a new house. You're building a completely new structure. The essay was a different kind of structure. You already did that. The PSA is something else. What's frustrating, I think, is I can't give you like solid tips on what you need to do because there are a bunch of different ways you can put together your PSA. I think one important thing to do is think in terms of like concept. Like, how are you going to deliver this information? Let's say you're putting together a video. Okay, so what are you going to do in that video? Um, are you going to tell a story? Are you going to find some sort of metaphor that's behind the whole piece? Are you going to try to mimic the sort of issue you're dealing with? For example, I had a couple students who were writing about movie trailers and how movie trailers reveal too much. So, will your film like mimic what a movie trailer does? Even if it's straightforward, you don't have to come up with something clever like a story or a comparison or some other trick. Even if you deliver the information pretty much straightforward, I mean, still, what's the best way you're going to communicate that information? Like, what's the best way to sort of grab your viewer or your listener through your comic or your song or your film? What's the best way to kind of present your information? Which pieces of information are most important to them? How are you going to embellish the overall look of the piece? I also recommend, there are like 10 million PSAs out there. Like, you can go to YouTube and watch public service announcements. We looked at a couple print ads. Nobody's really doing print ad style PSAs for this class, but we looked at some examples from last week. You can look at some of those online. You can get a sense of what public service announcements look or feel like, or you can think about the ones you see on television all the time. Years ago, there was one about drugs. It was like, here's your brain, and here's your brain on drugs, and someone was cracking an egg into a frying pan to represent your brain being scrambled on drugs. I don't know if people here in this session are old enough to remember those commercials. Those were those were from a long time ago. But maybe familiarize yourself with what these things look like. In essence, it's kind of similar to a commercial. I mean, a commercial is different because it sells a product, but a PSA is similar in the sense that it's not selling a product, but it's selling, if you will, a message. So just as people put together songs and short videos and audio pieces, the same strategies you see them use, like when you're listening to the radio or when you're watching television, you can kind of think along those lines as well when it comes to your public service announcement. So there are lots of ways to go about it, but it does require revision, okay? Looking at things anew. Peer feedback. So we just finished peer review. How did things go, by the way? Were there any people who are here who didn't get a response? And if you did get a response, was it pretty good, or was it? I mean, I tried to really stress the importance of feedback in last week's session, so I hope I sort of inspired people to give good feedback. Okay, Rochelle didn't get a response. That happens, even though I tell them. I'm going to have to restructure that assignment, like put in the assignment instructions that everybody has to respond to the person who's right in front of them on the discussion board or something like that. But I think, I've asked other classes, and I think about 75% of the people got responses. Yeah, Dustin makes a good point, too. He would have liked to get a couple responses. I'm thinking of these things, too. Like, I used to require 2, but then I pulled it back to 1 because I felt bad and thought people were too busy already. But maybe I should go back to requiring people to read at least 2 student drafts and give responses. That would also maybe increase the probability that everybody will get at least 1 response. But anyway, you got peer feedback. And hopefully you've gone to the board and read it if you received it. There was a reason also. Remember, I said I wouldn't be participating in the board that much. I'd just be peeking in, and that I would wait until later in the week to get your essays back because I didn't want to disturb the peer review process. And that's just because my words as the instructor tend to carry more weight. So I was kind of nervous that if people got their essays back pretty much immediately last week, like on Tuesday or something, then they wouldn't care so much about what their fellow students wrote to them. But I would encourage you not to think that way. So if you did get a response, read that person's feedback and take it seriously. Decide what makes sense and ignore the rest. If none of it makes sense and none of it's useful, I guess maybe you could ignore all of it. But don't ignore it just out of hand. I mean, really think about what the person has said to you and consider it. Same goes for my feedback. Use what makes sense and get rid of the rest. Again, I encourage people to think through what I've said carefully. Just don't. Sometimes people have an immediate reaction to disagree, or they don't want to hear the advice. But whether it's from a peer or whether it's from me, consider the feedback you got carefully and make decisions accordingly. Let me take a sip from my drink. By the way, I don't get mad if people ignore certain pieces of my advice. I mean, usually I think I have some stuff or a lot of stuff that's pretty much accurate. But if there's some small aspect that you disagree with, you're free. You can feel free to ignore that. Okay, it's not like I'm going to fail you if you don't follow every piece of my feedback to the perfect letter. Okay, so some thought questions, some things to think about. How will the peer feedback influence your PSA project? Or how will the instructor's feedback influence your PSA project? Okay, and I want you to think through these questions carefully. Hold on, let me check something real quickly. Ah, okay. Give me 2 seconds because I actually have the wrong version of this document open. It's basically the same thing, but that's actually a quiz question, I believe. Okay, so here's quiz question number one, okay? Related to the thought question I just showed you. First of all, summarize your classmates' feedback, okay? If you didn't receive feedback from a classmate, summarize my feedback. Okay, so there's quiz question number one. Some of you may have already have done this, okay? Some of you who didn't receive a response, I just told you to write a reflection back to me. So, I apologize for making you do it over again. But the importance here is I want to make sure that everybody's read either peer feedback or my feedback and understood it like entirely. So, quiz question number one, really simple. Summarize the feedback of the person who responded to you. If you didn't get feedback from another student, go ahead and respond and summarize my feedback. Okay, moving on. Quiz question number two. How will the feedback you received influence your PSA project? Okay, and again, if you didn't receive feedback from a peer, how will my feedback influence your PSA project? And here it's a little bit different than your reflection, possibly. I haven't read everybody's reflections yet. But here I'm actually asking you to anticipate what you might need to do in terms of your PSA. It's Tuesday of week 4. So even if you haven't started your PSA, I hope most people have already started brainstorming about like how they would like to deliver the material, coming up with a concept, coming up with a strategy. Okay, so how will the feedback you received either from a peer or from me influence your PSA project? There's quiz question number 2. And moving on. Okay, you thought we were done with APA citation, right? We spent a lot of time on this in week 3. You had some quiz questions that dealt with APA. You had to show APA knowledge with your essay. The results were a little bit mixed on the essay. I think overall people did a pretty decent job. For the most part, I saw just about everyone at least attempting to follow the principles of APA, even though they might have gotten a lot of the particulars a little bit wrong. But we're not finished with APA because we're coming back to it for the final project. And it's with this reminder that any images or music that you use, it has to be cited, and it has to be cited in APA style. Okay? Again, we're only using allowable images, allowable music, so you're not going to take like copyrighted music and use it in your public service announcement. You're not just going to Google whatever image and take whatever you want and stick it in your project. You'll go to like an allowable site. I think I showed them last time, like compfight.com is a site that pretty much I would like you to use if you need to use an image or two in your project. Westar Music Database, which is accessible through the Full Sail Library databases, is also something you could use. Esther asks, great question. If it's something I purchased, is it considered mine? No. It depends what you mean. If it's... Oh, it gets confusing. There are things called royalty-free images and music, which means you pay like a one-time charge for something, but then you are entitled to use it basically as often as you want in commercial projects, in school projects, etc. But if you mean, okay, I went out and bought the newest Rihanna album, can I use that music? No. Like, no copyrighted music can be used. And let me quickly show. Okay, I can't remember if I showed this last week or not, but you have this source in the Full Sail Library databases called Westar. And like last week, everything's going really, really slowly because I probably have too many things open and running. Okay, get in. Okay, so we go to the library like we always do, right? We enter the research databases, and if you scroll down, like most of you are staying up here with like EBSCOhost stuff to search for your articles. But if we scroll all the way down, we have this thing called Westar Music. And this is really cool because normally this stuff costs anywhere from $15 to $60 to use, but as a Full Sail student, you get to use it for free. So we have lots of different categories like classical, comedy, jazz, rock, and they all have those like corny titles like sports, dynamic and defiant, or rock, solid and sauntering. You can tell they're sort of generic music files because they have these generic names like dance, winner take all. Okay, we'll go into. Oh, thanks, Dustin. I'll try to remember that if my audio is cutting out while I'm speaking. Let's go into this rock music record. Okay, so here's the album itself. So I'm going to try not to use the cursor or scroll. You can see there are different songs like Stopped at the Edge, Behind the Mask. And to use any of these files, you just have to go through the purchasing process because you're a Full Sail student as long as you're logged in with the Full Sail username and password, which is provided on the previous page when you click on the database. You pretty much just have to go through the checkout process, and then you'll be able to download, I think it's an MP3 version of these songs, and then you can use it pretty much at will. However, in order to cite the information, and by the way, this applies not just to music in the Westar Music Database, but if you find any allowable Creative Commons type sound files, you'll have to cite properly. So let me just click on Stopped at the Edge. And, oops, I'm scrolling. And look, we get all the information we need. There is a composer, Vic Sapansky. The album has a title, that corny title, Rock, Solid, and Sauntering. There's a publisher, Westar Music Publishing. Okay, so we have all the material we need to put together an APA style citation. I'm going to close this window now because I want to get as many things closed as possible. I'm going to show how to cite music and images in just a second. But in general, like here, and this might relate to a quiz question, here's the importance of citation. A, it's a requirement for this course. It's actually not even just this course, but Full Sail in general. I think I've said this in the past, but you're all entering industries where you'll be dealing with this stuff a lot, whether you're in graphic design or music or entertainment business. Like, you can't just take whatever you want. You can't just take an image to use in promotional materials, or take someone's song, or right. You can't do that without permission. So we teach these principles early, and you're going to see it again and again and again throughout your time at Full Sail. You should have already got some of it. They stress this in DGL. I know that because I also teach that course. But when you get into your specific classes, this will be stressed a lot. So it's a requirement. Second, you need to give credit to those who have helped you. Okay, you may not think that using an image in your project, whether it's for school or whether it's as a paid professional, is important. But no, giving credit is always important. And finally, others might find your sources useful. Okay, for school projects, that's an easy thing, right? Someone might like the article you cited and want to find it and read it. But it can also apply to other things. People might like that image that you used, or that music file that you used, or something else. So others can always benefit from your things. So try to remember those three things. It's a requirement. It's important to give credit, and others might find your resources useful. Okay, so here's how we cite music. Let me move the control panel out of the way for a second. If you think you're going to use music, allowable music. Again, I need to stress that, so nothing copyrighted. Here's the format. So if you need to take a screenshot, you should probably do so. But really, it's not any different than what you've been doing with articles. It's just that instead of an author, we have a composer. Instead of the article title, we have a song title. Okay, it's basically the same logic. We're just applying it to music. So this actually comes from the Westar Music Database. So this guy R. Ivanov, he's the composer of the song. The track is named "Letting Loose." Here's the name of the album, and here's the publisher. Okay, that's all we need. Now, if we switch to images, last time I showed this site, compfight.com. This is a site you really should stick to if you want to find images. The AP Images database, which you should have learned about in DGL, also is an allowable site. It's also found through the Full Sail Library databases. AP Images can be really cool. The only thing that's frustrating about that is because they're photos that are typically used in news stories. Sometimes they're not like the greatest, most professional looking photos. Like they're okay, but a lot of them are sort of taken on the spot. But compfight.com, which is a Flickr search tool, has a ton of allowable images. So I'm just going to do a search for puppies. Puppies. And I believe I mentioned this last class, but everything up here are stock photos. And this actually kind of relates to the question Esther made. Like music that you pay for one time because it's royalty free. Usually they tend to be sort of generic music files. You're not going to get like a famous song. You're not going to get a Taylor Swift song royalty free. But royalty free music or stock photos that you pay for, so anything above the dotted line here at CompFight is actually taking you to a different website where you can purchase stock photos. When you purchase a stock photo or when you purchase a royalty free music file, then you're basically paying for the right to be able to use it whenever you want. I encourage people just to use whatever's below the dotted line because you can use this stuff for free. So I'm going to click on one of these guys here. Oh, they're all so cute. Let me pick this one. I like this guy. Or gal, I don't know. Okay, so as you can see, some rights reserved. Okay, that's crucial. That's what we want. Some rights reserved means that we can use it as long as we give credit. If it says all rights reserved, then you shouldn't be touching it. So if you ever come across an image file and it says copyright, all rights reserved, you shouldn't be using it. But this one's okay, and I could choose what size I want and download it. The important thing here, though, is that in this HTML here, because if you're using on a website, you just have the HTML code that you can then embed into your web page. But we actually just want the core information about the photo and who took it and when it was taken. So I'm going to go in here and copy the URL. Right? Let me make this bigger so you can see it. There. Okay. See, I copied the URL. If I copy it, plug it into my browser. Then I get more detailed information about the picture. Okay, let me move my control panel. We can see that it was taken on April 11, 2009. We again get repeated that it's a some rights reserved image file. It used to be easier the way it was set up. There would be all this information in the top right corner here that would tell you the photographer's name, the date, the title. Now you kind of have to search for it, so do the best you can. Here I think the photo taker is Jerry, and I believe this is the title, Lab Puppy Nala. Okay, so we have all the information we need: an author, a title, a date, and we're good to go. And by the way, if someone doesn't have like their full name, that's fine. You know, if the person who took the photo is named Jerry Smith, then great, Jerry Smith, right? Or Smith, comma J. But if someone's online moniker is I don't know, Hot Mama 97, then as ridiculous as it might look on your references page, the author is going to be Hot Mama 97. Okay, so search for as much material as you can, and then again, you'll just plug it in. And as you can see, it's the same concept, right? Instead of an author, we have a photographer. Instead of putting a publication year for the article in parentheses, we put the year the image was taken. Again, title, etc. So here's an example, okay? Here's the photographer, Arganosa, 2009 is the date. There is a title for this, Taking a Test. By the way, this is referring to a different photo entirely. We do put in brackets, and I actually forgot to include this on the previous slide about music, but we do put in brackets things like photograph or sound recording, just so we know what type of medium the file is. If it doesn't have a label at all, we know it's like an article title. But if we put things like photograph or sound recording or video, then we know what type of medium the thing is. And then you just, as always, just put a retrieve line, okay? Retrieve from, and then use that URL that you just copied into the browser for that image. So it's pretty simple. You're just using the same rules you use for articles, and you're adapting it to images and music. Okay, so if you use images or music, I don't want to see people just sort of making up the rules or just throwing in a URL or what have you. Esther says, if we cite it, does that mean we do not need permission to use it? No. Great questions. I'm glad these questions come up because I think this is the confusion that people have. Like, if you just purchase a Taylor Swift record, that doesn't mean you can use her songs. If you cite a Taylor Swift song that you use in the background of your PSA, that still doesn't cover you. Okay? The rules are pretty strict. We don't use any copyrighted material. It doesn't matter if we have a full APA reference for it. It doesn't matter if we went to the store and bought it. We don't own the rights to that song. It might sound ridiculous. Is Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever going to really come after you because you're using their music in a school project? Probably not. But again, this is about something bigger. It's about making sure that people who attend Full Sail realize that these are issues they're going to face in the industry, where you can't just do that. Esther, yeah, videos from YouTube are considered copyrighted for the most part. And even if they're not, you would still have to get express permission from the person who created it. So let's say it's a really sort of amateur type YouTube thing, like the things that I post, right? I process these sessions when it's over, and I upload them to YouTube. Like, someone would still have to ask my permission. They couldn't just take my YouTube video and use it. And actually, that also raises bigger questions, which is that, I do hope that you create most of the material yourself. I think it's fine to use allowable images or music to help flesh things out, to make it seem more complete. But yeah, we're not going out there and grabbing like movie clips from our favorite Pixar movie, or sound clips from our favorite songs that we own on CD, or taking YouTube elements that's someone else's creation. Okay? So yeah, be careful with all this stuff. Quiz question number 3. Why is it important to cite? So I'm looking for those 3 things that I mentioned just a few slides ago. And now it's time to talk about what you need to include for your final project. And the great thing about having these go-to sessions and a required quiz is that, for the most part, everybody has to watch it and listen to it, which is great, because in the past I would get lots of incomplete final projects because there's more to it than just giving me your public service announcement. So let's switch gears and go to the assignment sheet. Let me close this. Okay, so here's the assignment sheet for the final project. You can read through most of the details on your own. It's due Sunday. Okay, so this coming Sunday, it's worth 15%. But there are like 4 steps, okay? And it's important that you include all 4 steps. So step 1 is to create a new Microsoft Word document and have a properly formatted APA cover page. This should be easy, because if you got that right for the essay, just use that cover page again. I mean, change the title if the title of your actual public service announcement is different than your essay. But yeah, copy and paste the formatting from your essay and just delete the essay part, okay? But if you didn't follow that step for the essay, you'll need to watch the week 3 session and relearn how to do that step. Step 2 is to upload your final project to an appropriate website. Okay, so if it's a film, you'll probably use something like Vimeo or YouTube. If it's an audio file, either a song or a podcast, SoundCloud seems to be the overwhelming choice. Okay, SoundCloud is sort of like the YouTube for just strictly audio materials. There are other options. If you can get me something through Dropbox or Google Docs, that's fine as well. That sometimes works well for the comic. Other people sometimes will upload their comic to an image hosting site and give me the link to that. The important thing is I just need a link to your project, okay? That works. And once you do that, you should copy and paste the link to that project on the second page of your Microsoft Word document. I'm going to show you an example of like what this looks like, and it's actually one of your assets, one of your downloadable items, so you have it right there for you to open on your own. So you can look at an example. Number two, step two, number two, include your written script or lyrics right beneath the link to your project. The only exception is if you do a comic, because if you do a comic, all the text is going to be in the comic itself. But if you created a video, I want a script to the film. If it's a song, I need the lyrics. If it's a podcast, I need, again, the script. I mentioned this previously, but it's for two reasons. One, I have some writing to evaluate. And two, it shows some evidence of planning. Okay? People really should be thinking the project through, coming up with a plan, coming up with a script, working from that script. I even just wrote to somebody the other day who was saying that he wants to do a sort of more laid-back, conversational style podcast. And I said, that's great, but you should still be working from a script. That the trick is to make it sound conversational and formal, but actually there's quite a bit of planning that goes into it. Okay, so the script also shows me that you're not just turning on your microphone and speaking for a minute and then stopping and calling it a PSA, or turning on your camera and speaking into the camera for a minute, hitting stop, and handing that in as your PSA film. Okay, so the script shows evidence of planning. Including a reference page with any outside material and research. So this means not just the image and music that you use, if you used any, but also those articles that you listed on your references page for the essay. Okay, because technically those are informing even the multimedia version of your public service announcement. So anything that you use to help you with your PSA, articles, if you used images, if you used music, all that stuff needs to be listed. And finally, you have to write a short reflective essay. At least 250 words, and you are responding to these questions here. Okay, use complete sentences, by the way. So it asks you things like, what were you expecting from English composition? How did your rhetorical situation, basically your understanding of your topic and the assignment, change from week to week throughout the month? How does your final project show your progression throughout the course? Okay, so you're basically looking at these, 6, 7 questions, and coming up with a 250-word reflection. You're basically answering these questions. This isn't the place to complain about the course or express how much you love the course. You have an activity on the FSO platform for that. It's called the Student Course Evaluation. That's the place you can go when the course is drawing to a close, and you can say what you love about the course, what you hate about the course. Okay, the reflection isn't that. It's really a response to these questions here. Finally, as usual, how to label files and upload it and stuff. Okay, so here's what like a final project kind of looks like. It's mostly blank. This is just the template, but it shows you what the final project sort of looks like when it's handed in. So like here's someone's cover page, right? He or she would have to come up with a title, but there's the cover page. And on page 2, again, we center a title on the top of page 2, just like we do with an essay. And then they typically have something like, the link to the project, and this is where you would put your YouTube or Vimeo link or SoundCloud link. The script. The script usually appears right below that. References page. Okay, so I've just made one up here. So here's an image. Here's an MP3 file. Here's an article. Okay, so you have your references page. Rochelle asked, do we need to have our student number on the cover page? No. I know that there are other classes like DGL where you always have to put your student number on whatever you hand in. But for this class, because we're teaching APA style, no, there's no student number. It's in English that you first get introduced to APA style, so that's not a feature of APA. So the references page on page 3, and then on page 4, starting there at least, your reflection. Actually, I think this needs to be bumped up. Let me go ahead. Okay, so the reflection, and follow the same rules you always did. So for example, we double space, we indent right here is my reflection, blah 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 blah, and so on. Okay, so follow the same basic rules that we taught for the essay. Don't make up your own style. But it really is that simple. But just make sure that you have all 4 of these pieces in place. Okay, a cover page and a fully set up APA style document, a link to your project, a script if required, a references page, and the 250 word reflection. If you have all that, you're probably in pretty good shape. It drives me crazy because every month there's a couple students. They just hand in the public service announcement. There's no reflection. There's no Word document that has all this information. There's no references page. And as you can see on the grading rubric here, the PSA itself is worth 30 points. Okay, so it's worth a lot, but there's still 70 other points that are included in the final project. So if you just hand in the PSA, you're leaving a lot of points on the table. So don't forget to hand anything in, please. Okay, let me close that. We are nearing the end of the session. Quiz question number 4. And this will help you too because your reflection kind of touches on this exact same question. But how will your final project show your development as a writer during the month? And I want some specificity and thought here. Don't just say, oh, I made so much progress this month and the PSA helped me realize that. No. I mean, talk about the things from a writing perspective or a topic selection perspective or a development perspective, right? Like, how will your final project show the culmination of what you've done throughout the entire month? Okay? And here, writer is used in the broadest term possible. We think of writing as meaning just putting words on the page as in an essay, but I mean writer in like the fuller sense. Everything from topic selection to topic improvement to development to having to rethink material, revise material, plan material. Okay, so I mean it in that sort of fuller sense of the word. How will that final project show your development as a writer this month? Questions? Preguntas? About the final project, about APA, about what's allowed to be used and what isn't, about anything that relates to the course or due dates. You pretty much have this week entirely free, by the way, right? You have to complete this go-to training quiz. Otherwise, you have the week pretty much free and clear to work on the final project, and that's by design. So, questions? Anybody? Derek says, is iMovie okay to use? Yes, absolutely, of course. I love iMovie. It's a little bit frustrating because I know that not everybody has their Macs. Did anybody get their Mac shipped to them yet? Some people get lucky and they get it in week 3 or week 4. But iMovie is part of the suite of programs that it's included in Mac. And yeah, iMovie is awesome because it's so easy to use. It's so user-friendly. It has built-in sound files, everything from like music you can have playing in the background to sound effects like crickets chirping and people applauding. Yeah, iMovie is awesome. It's so easy. Like, you can shoot your own footage and you just drag and drop it in. You can edit the clip. You can have words appear over the clip. You can create little inner titles that appear between clips. They have a lot of built-in templates of you want to make it look and sound like a movie trailer. There's a way to do that. Yeah, it's a really, really fun and easy to use program. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know how easy. I mean, I assume on the iPad it works just as well. But yeah, it's terrific. Any other questions? Are we good to go? Yes, no. Okay. Good. As always, if people need to leave, if you're comfortable, if you don't have questions, and you're feeling okay, we're done for the night. Okay, so you can leave whenever you want. You won't break my heart. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Esther says, "Can we still use information in the PSA that was not included in the essay?" Sure. If you found some like additional information, or maybe you had information that just didn't fit in the essay, that's relevant to your topic and is going to help your PSA, yeah, absolutely. You don't have to limit yourself to what was in the essay. And the opposite is also true. No one should feel compelled to include every single detail that was in the essay in the actual PSA. Because again, the PSA is a completely different animal. If it's a video or if it's a podcast, you only have 1 to 3 minutes to work with, so you're never going to be able to fit in all that material. Derek says, "Can I use my own guitar music for the background?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you created your own music, then yeah, there's no. I mean, I would create a citation anyway. Just list yourself as the composer, and just so if anybody else were to ever look at your project, they would know that it belongs to you. But yeah, 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 that's a good workaround because anytime, like, yeah, I have a piano. I have a guitar. I'm not very good at guitar though, but yeah, that would probably be my solution. Like, I would take something that I've written on the piano and use that as background music. That's a really easy way to get around citation too, right? You don't have to worry about it. You just use your own stuff. Are there any full sale resources for video? I don't think so. There might. Well, let me check very, very quickly. I can't remember if AP Images now has a video section. Could be wrong. While I'm looking for this, um, the only question I have for you, Esther, and don't take this the wrong way because maybe I'm completely misunderstanding, but I hope you're not going overboard too much with using other things that are already created, like other people's videos or other people. I mean, it's fine to use tiny little things to help round out your project. AP Images. Oh man, this is so slow. I forgot to stop the recording. Maybe that's what's slowing me down here. Okay, you can search for images in AP Images or more media. Let's see what more media does. Oops. Print graphics, sound bank, text archive, interactives. Doesn't look like they have video images. Um, you can always do searches too, like Creative Commons video. Let's see if that comes up with anything. Browse the Creative Commons licensed videos on Vimeo. So, okay, you might check that out. Okay, Creative Commons is the term for stuff that's typically some rights reserved. So, as long as it fits into that sort of category. Okay, so, here's something, right? Browse the Creative Commons licensed videos on Vimeo. I'm not sure how much of it's going to fit what you need. Okay. And you might want to look into these different categories because they're actually different types of licenses and what they allow you to do. But typically they allow for usage as long as you give credit to it. So that would be my advice. Do a search for Creative Commons video. Okay, any other questions, people?